Products designed to clean better or whiten better are ubiquitous. I mean, look at Live Fresh, for example, right? But in pursuit of cleaner or whiter teeth, are we disrupting the natural salivary proteins designed to protect our teeth? Hello again, I'm Dr. Rob, accompanied by Tami, and you're listening to the Dental Formulators Playbook.
Obviously, everyone wants cleaner and whiter teeth, right?
Yes, and I'm not saying we shouldn't clean or whiten the teeth, and there are still some agents in those products that might be good, but as with any treatment or habit, too much of a good thing might be a bad thing. We've talked about this in previous episodes regarding the use of baking soda to clean the teeth, or even Live Fresh. Remember, that has the EDTA, 2.6% mineral stripper. You see, chronic use of these products, of any treatment, okay, a little bit might do good, but if you're using it over the course of months or even years, and even the ailment might not show up until maybe months or years later,
Yikes.
well, if that's going to happen, then obviously there's something bad. But sometimes we just don't even think about it because we think, hey, this is what we've been doing. This is my routine. It's hard to change up the routine.
Right.
And surely one of these dental products might not be contributing to my dental issues, right?
Yeah, you would never want to think that.
Yeah,
Totally.
it's
I
so
mean,
true.
honestly, you wouldn't, you
Yeah,
buy it
you
to
wouldn't.
help, right?
Yeah.
So I get it what you're saying. The teeth may be clean, maybe even have excellent buffer capacity to
Yep.
withstand acidic challenges,
Yep.
all that fun stuff, but maybe tartar-like deposits may eventually form.
Yeah, exactly. And there could be several reasons why this is. For instance, mineral, well, it could be either stripped away from the teeth due to the treatment composition, like we just said, like EDTA in the Live Fresh, or the mouth pH is sufficiently alkaline. In other words, the pH is high enough that all of a sudden that tilts maybe some of the proteins, and all of a sudden maybe you don't have as much control over where that calcium and phosphate is actually going or how it's getting incorporated into the tooth.
Okay.
And so maybe it's not getting incorporated into the tooth, but it's collecting as precipitate onto the tooth.
That's bad. Previously, we discussed amylogenin.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. That's the enamel forming protein that naturally degrades as the enamel develops.
Right.
You'd mentioned there's a strong interest to emulate that protein's capabilities.
Yes.
Are you talking about that protein or are you talking about something different?
Well, we are talking about salivary proteins in this episode for sure. But we have to think about, not a melanogenin per se, because again, it degraded naturally, right? I mean, it started, but it degrades naturally as the enamel grows and develops. I mean, that's just part of it. A lot of researchers out there, companies or, academic researchers, they want to get into this polypeptide space. They're trying to emulate that kind of action. But we're not necessarily talking about just one particular polypeptide. We're talking about something a little bit different here. And what we have to first understand, just like how we talk about teeth, and we have so many teeth in our mouth, right? Whether you're young or if you have your permanent dentition, or if we're talking about the microbiome, right? There's so many different species that are present.
Right?
It's a lot of them opportunistic. They go commensal unless it's dysbiotic, and then they go pathogenic, right? Now we're going to be talking about salivary proteins.
Okay.
And we're not talking about a melanogenin because that naturally degraded. We're talking about what our salivary glands are already secreting right now as we speak, as you listen to our daily existence, right? Our daily and nightly existence, if we will. So if I refer to a 2022 paper that was published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, they outlined that there's at least 68 different salivary proteins that are laid down, which actually form the pellicle, that protein-rich material, biofilm, if you will,
It
that
acts as a
sits
protector.
on the enamel surface. Yeah, now, and although that was a 2022 paper that said that there's 68, please know that back in 2016 in the journal PLOS One, IU School of Dentistry researchers outlined that there was at least 72 core proteins,
Okay.
or at least proteins that are just affiliated with this, not necessarily core, but they found that many. So let's give a little bit of range here. Is it 68 on the dot? Is it 72 on the dot? Probably not, but it's at least, let's put it this way, more than 60. Right now, depending on the sequences and stuff and who you're looking at, it could be upwards of over 75 one day. You never know.
Yeah, and that I would have had no idea that our microbiome is very diverse because of bacteria, but
Yep.
I don't think I would have thought about the different proteins.
Yeah, well, of those 68 or 72, 15 of those would be considered to be core. And of those 15 core,
Okay.
11 of those proteins actually have antimicrobial benefits.
Okay, so I like where you're heading here. Interrupting antimicrobial
Yes, yes.
proteins may contribute to the susceptibility of oral pathogens, right?
Well, of course, yes, of course. I mean, if you're interrupting our body's natural immune system, and if there's antimicrobial proteins that do that, of course that would do
Okay.
that. However, I don't want to consider just the microbiome with all these different pathogens and we don't want to just consider ourselves just the teeth. We're actually going to be talking about, well, what happens whenever those proteins are actually on the teeth?
Okay, so in addition to the hard tissue like enamel
Yep.
and the microbiome,
Yep.
now we're talking about the third component,
Yeah,
proteins.
exactly. And these proteins have several different impacts on our oral environment, no doubt. Like some of them, for instance, will serve as that connective tissue that allows, for instance, the initial colonizers from the microbiome, namely the streptococci species, for example, ubiquitous in the mouth. It allows that streptococci and other similar early colonizers to attach to the enamel surface. So it almost
Okay,
acts as like this bridging layer. Is it enamel? No, it's protein based. And well, pathogens and commensals, the microbes in general, they like the proteins. There's a lot of ionic action there. There's probably some cations that are also present, hanging about. And microbes need these things not only for shelter, not only for attachment, but also to conduct synthetic operations. So if they want to produce their
okay,
own, for instance, saccharides, if they want to, grow and multiply, all of these things, that is so resource intensive. Of course, they're going to need carbohydrates eventually, but you still need these cofactors, these ions that can help out with that. And so the presence of proteins actually on the enamel surface are also going to attract some of these cations. And like, we're talking about
okay.
sodium ions, we're talking about potassium ions, calcium ions, things like that. Okay. So we still have that. Okay. So we have this connective tissue, right, that attracts the microbes to the tooth. But then we have other proteins that help fight infection. We just talked about that, right? They're
Which
antimicrobial.
is great.
And we're talking about not only those bacterias or viruses or yeast or molds that are, introduced into the oral cavity by external sources, whether somebody has a cold and they sneeze and you somehow breathe that
Yeah.
in your mouth breather or whatever. That could be one example. Another example, though, is what if you have a caries like situation going on or a gingivitis situation going on? You already have endogenous
Right.
disease in the oral environment. Some of these proteins might be trying to fight against those conditions, that
Okay.
have been produced by the pathogens. And yet, still others, you have other proteins that are involved in modulating the remineralization and the demineralization process. So, if mineral is being available, created by ions that are secreted from the glands or introduced in a topical formulation, I'm talking about like calciums and phosphates and fluorides, there exist these proteins that help modulate what that looks like. Is the mineral going to get integrated into the tooth, or is it going to be resulting in just precipitates that
Okay.
appear tartar-like, for instance? And honestly, all of these coexist into what researchers typically call the acquired enamel pellicle. AEP is an acronym. Sometimes researchers use this, but we're talking about that acquired enamel pellicle.
Which is kind of innate to everybody has
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, everybody has that, but the composition of the proteins will vary.
Well,
So
definitely.
maybe some people might have more AMPs. They might have more antimicrobial proteins. Others might have more proteins that are going to be more along the lines of maybe offering some kind of attachment,
Okay.
bioadhesion for the microbes, while others maybe more or less proteins that are going to be involved in modulating that Riemann Demon process and what
Okay.
that mineral, looks like whenever it's generated from the source of, ions that are either from the glands or from topically applied products. That's right.
Okay, so it sounds like these proteins help the microbes,
Yes.
whether the commensal or pathogenic, attach to the acquired enamel pellicle,
Yep.
which you
The
just mentioned, the
AEP.
AEP,
Yep.
which is
The
a new one for
AEP.
me. We have talked before, there's been strong interest in polypeptides for enamel growth. So is that where we're going?
Yes, and this is where I joked, shave a sheep, save a tooth.
Yes.
If we're talking about the keratin derived polypeptide approach, I
Yes.
thought that one was kind of promising. But that one is gonna have to have more of a restorative kind of feel. That's not something that is an at home thing that you could use. But there was another one that I kind of liked that was inspired by statharin, and we'll talk about statharin in a minute. But that
Okay.
was an approach that I really liked because it was water soluble and it was able to generate mineral, and they were able to test microhardness in the lab based enamel specimens. Anyway, it was a promising thing. Yeah, we discussed that I think a couple episodes ago, right?
Okay.
So,
So
yep.
there are even others, right, that are promoted as having benefits, but we know in reality the benefits probably aren't there, like
Yeah,
Curadone.
no, I absolutely agree with that. 2025 paper was published in the British Dental Journal, and it was a clinical study. They looked at people with white spot lesions and they evaluated three different products. Two of them were fluoride-based cavity varnishes, and one of them was Curadont. And what they found is by the end of the 9-month clinical trial, and they had interim data measurements at 3 months and 6 months, but the fluoride varnish treatments had better remineralization and actually gave pretty similar color benefits, while the Cura don't did not remineralize as well and did not give the color improvement. There was a questionnaire that was involved, and as well as some metrics that they did the color. The participants in the study, yeah, it didn't perform as well. Now, mind you, are there acid treatments involved in fluoride varnish applications?
Absolutely not.
No. And what does Curadont
Oh
have?
my gosh. They,
So,
yeah, they
so first they strip,
strip it all
yeah. So
away.
first they strip the pellicle. You have to do that, and they use the sodium hypochlorite to do it. Then again, they use the phosphoric acid etch to open up the lesion, essentially take away the lesion or the
Right.
discoloration, and then they attempt to put in this peptide in hopes that it's going to remineralize. And it doesn't matter which one you're looking at. I mean, they did two different sodium fluoride varnishes. Both of them outperformed this cure. So in other words, that Curadont is not working as it is. I mean, it's a good story. That's what we want it to go there. And there's going to be other polypeptides
That actually
eventually
work.
that will work. This is not one of them. It's a good story, but it is not one of them.
Quick summary here then. So even with the acid etching help of the lesion, the
Yep.
Curadont
Yep.
was clinically inferior to fluoride varnish treatments that don't even, they're just good for the teeth. They don't etch at all.
Yeah, exactly. They leave the pellicle layer intact if there is one after cleaning because, and I'm going to be talking about this in like 30
Okay.
seconds, but that pellicle is formed within seconds. Like as soon as you
Okay.
get your teeth clean, boom, the salivary proteins are put down within seconds. And over the course of 3 minutes, you're going to have an established pellicle layer. I mean, it'll be an
That's
early one,
fast.
but it's going to have a ton of different proteins already on there. That's the way our bodies work. But I want to draw the attention because this episode is about those peptides. We have to talk about that hypochlorite. If you're destroying some of these natural proteins,
Hmm.
that might actually be conduits for improved tooth health or helping to protect the tooth health. If you apply the sodium chloride, then you're going to obviously, damage it. Obviously, it's just a one shot. It's not a chronic thing, but this has application for continued whitening treatments, fresh breath treatments,
Right.
aggressive toothpaste use of certain agents that are
Right.
not well buffered or do not have fluoride, like the Live Fresh, for instance. If you're having a
Hmm.
high alkaline system that does not have mitigating ingredients in there that can help, prevent tartar formation, this is where this is coming into play.
Why exactly? So,
Yeah, okay, so the pellicle layer, right? So, and we're going to talk about exactly what that pellicle layer is, but that could be removed by the hypochlorite, by the protein busting whitening agents, enzymatic agents. So sometimes people are referring to this with respect to papain and bromelain. We have too. I mean,
right.
it works well, but do you want to use too high a concentration and do you want to use that chronically? Maybe not,
So it basically
because
strips everything.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah, with respect to the proteins, it degrades it. It
Mhm.
catabolizes it. That's what it's meant to do. It's a
Right.
meat tenderizer,
Okay.
right? EDTA, that's a mineral stripper, not necessarily against the salivary proteins, but it's going to make the salivary proteins work that much harder. And some of these ingredients are really adept at cleaning the teeth. What does cleaning the teeth even mean? First of all, if you have tartar, that's another issue that you need to be able to address with
Hmm.
your clinician or doctor, dentist, whoever, hygiene, figure out what products might be best for you. If you have tartar, you might not want to be using a high pH formulation because you might
Right.
be frustrating the action of the proteins. The proteins need a certain conformation sometimes in order to put down great mineral. That's for example.
So is that
Yeah.
why you think using maybe like a baking soda or more specifically a fluoride-free baking soda toothpaste over a long time
Yes.
might not be a good
Yeah,
idea?
absolutely. So,
Okay.
there's some acid resistant proteins that are found, and again, I keep saying we'll talk about I'm gonna talk about them in just a minute, but those are very sensitive to pH. No
Okay.
doubt. I mean, they're acid resistant, so they are prepared to be stable in an acidic environment. But even if we're not talking about what is biologically secreted by our glands, if we were to think about, okay, well, how does the Curadont work? Remember, that system had two separate cartridges, right? It was going to be dispensed, kind of like an epoxy. One of the chambers is more alkaline, one of them is a little bit more acidic. In the high pH alkaline environment, as is, it doesn't have the right conformation that can instigate new mineral, or
Okay.
we would use the term nucleate new mineral growth.
Mm-hmm.
It will only do that if the pH can be brought down. All of a sudden, you bring the pH down, it adopts a different beta sheet kind of conformation, is what they refer to it as, with respect to this P11 peptide. And that conformation is supposed to be amenable to new mineral nucleation and growth.
Okay.
If your alkaline environment is too high and you're using some of these polypeptides that are sensitive and need it to be not be so high of a
Right.
pH, it's supposed to emulate maybe some of the salivary proteins. So that means, are you really getting the proper mineralization that you need? So
Right.
that just touches on maybe some of the specifics, and that remineralization in general is very complicated. Yeah, it
Sounds
is
like
in
it.
general. I mean, there's even people, they will argue to the death, is it a mineral based thing? Is it a microbial based thing? Is it a salivary protein based thing? What is going to control it? It's like very likely all of these
I was
things
gonna say,
all at
yeah.
once. It's just that this is what we're looking at.
So when we talk about the mineralization process in
Yes.
general, for those that might not understand, can you kind of
Okay.
explain that part of
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. So, and here's where we're going to talk about it. So, there are several salivary proteins that are involved in the remineralization and demineralization process, meaning minerals coming in, or they are responsible for maybe helping to release mineral from the tooth if there's too much of a good thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these proteins include cystatin, staphyrin, histatin, albumin, and acidic proline rich proteins. Not only do these attach to the tooth within seconds, as I mentioned, and then they can cure within about 3 minutes, but they serve as
That's
that
crazy.
foundational pellicle layer from which
Mm.
other proteins, mass proteins, larger proteins, even cross-linked ones, they can start to aggregate and get on there. So then you're going to have, for instance, your AMPs. Some of your antimicrobial proteins are going to be in the form of like lysozyme. You might have some of that. You might have lactoferrin, might also be present there. You might have mucins, very large mucins that will aggregate, and all of a sudden that becomes on top of it. Is cleaning the teeth still a good idea? Of course, because you can imagine it'll just continue to
Right.
accumulate and you get the secretion of proteins and it'll just turn into gunk. And of course, all this is going to be housing the microbes. But the important thing to note is that those proteins that I just mentioned are responsible. Those are core to the remin demon process of the teeth.
Okay. So, in other words, interrupting that whole cycle might determine whether or not it then gets integrated in the tooth
Yes, right.
or if it just gets gloppily.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And
So,
and how does it do it? Well, it does
right.
it by the affinity of the tooth surface. So these acidic, resistant, or these proteins that might have enough character that they are going to attach onto the negatively charged tooth surface, which it generally is, especially if we're talking about some kind of initially demineralized enamel structure. And we're not talking about frank caries here. I mean, if you do have a cavity and it needs to be filled, then fine. But if you have a white spot lesion, any kind of erosion, any kind of incipient, even no matter how small, it's going to be negatively charged. Why? Because you're taking out the positively charged calcium, for instance. You take out the
Okay.
positive, all of a sudden it becomes negative. You need some of
Okay.
these proteins to attract. So that's how it's going to do it. The affinity to the surface, and then of course its acid resistant properties. And what we're, again, just for the listeners that may not be too familiar with this, you have two different types of acid attack. You either have those acids that are produced by microbes, we consider that a dental disease, dental caries, or dental erosion. Dental erosion is not a disease, it's a state. Are you losing mineral? Absolutely, you're losing mineral permanently. But that is going to be from dietary acids. If somebody likes a fruit and vegetable
Mm-hmm.
diet, if you drink wine, if you have any kind of acidic beverage, that's the kind of thing. Or if you have reflux. So exogenous or
Yeah.
endogenous acids
Okay.
are the reason why somebody might have dental erosion.
So you're saying that some treatments, such as high cleaning plaque removal
Yep.
products like Live
Like
Fresh,
Live Fresh.
which they say they remove 250%. That's great. But
Yeah, but
what's the downside of that, right? So it's either the plaque removal, whitening, or pellicle removing. It really might be disrupting that whole natural protective protein layer that we have that's attached to either sound or even the demineralized tooth structure.
yeah, exactly. And this also applies to when
Hmm.
you brush your teeth, even after a meal or a drink.
So here's a question.
Okay.
Okay, I love orange juice. If I drink orange juice for breakfast, should I brush my teeth afterwards? Now, I'm going to ask this because there's a lot of people, kids especially, that may brush their teeth after breakfast, which I would assume most people do. So this is a really important question.
Yeah, it is a great question, but no, you should not brush your teeth after drinking orange juice. Full stop.
Well, there you go.
No.
So why? Because people are going to be like, I have to brush my teeth.
Well, because your teeth are already fighting against demineralization caused by the erosive attack, i.e., that's the orange juice. It has chelating molecules that are wanting to grab in there and pull mineral away from the tooth.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's great for your system, but for your teeth, it might not be doing.
Yeah, you have salivary proteins that are acidic based. They don't mind being the orange juice, and actually, they're going to try to attach onto the demineralized structure as that's happening. What happens if you brush your teeth?
Ooh, you're going to
You're
remove
going to
it.
be removing that. So you're removing those protective proteins, number one. And number two, you're actually creating what is known as wear. So you're introducing a physical removal of your mineral because your enamel's already soft
So
by
with the
virtue of the
with
acid.
the brush.
And then you're brushing, so you're introducing a physical ailment here. So that is the problem. Yeah. So no. Yeah.
That's scary. So even for those that grind their teeth, that would also produce loss of mineral, right?
Absolutely. Bruxism and all
Okay.
this stuff, the nightly grinding, sometimes people do that in the sleep, right? I mean, that's all
That's
part of
what I'm
it, the
saying.
grinding, the clenching,
Yeah.
all that is going to lead to erosion, wear-based
Right.
erosion.
So importantly, because we just told everybody don't brush your teeth after drinking orange juice.
That's right.
So we have to give some kind of solution for this, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is it?
Well, you can either use a straw, and try to not, force that contact between the fluid and that you're drinking and your
I know
tea.
people do that with wine to keep their teeth white.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I mean that is, it's
Right.
do you think that's going to be reasonable?
Not for kids.
No. Or you can stimulate salivary action by maybe taking a sugarless mint, or even better, eat something that has a pronounced calcium content and or a nice buffering capacity after you drink that acidic, drink, whatever that is. What things are calcium rich that you can think of that you might
Milk,
want to eat? Yep, milk with
cheese,
cheese
yogurt.
and yogurt. So those are the big three. So if somebody is drinking the juice
Have
or
it
whatever,
first.
have the juice first and then have your calcium rich foods, next.
Okay. Okay. So what about orange juice with calcium?
Yeah, studies have shown that you do have reduced erosive effects if calcium is present, but still don't get into the habit of brushing your teeth right after. So even if you have orange juice with calcium, it's still not a good idea to immediately brush.
That's a really important, and not just orange juice, right? I
Yep.
mean, now if I don't have anything else after drinking orange juice, then will my salivary proteins kind of help provide that
Yeah,
protection?
absolutely. Those that are acid resistant or that are already involved in the
Okay.
acquired enamel pellicle, we're talking
Okay.
again seconds to the first 3 minutes. They're going to be trying to mitigate
That's
the
so
loss.
fast.
Yeah, exactly. And they're involved in this Riemann demon process that they, and it's all ion based, right? It's all pH based, ion based,
And that's why
meaning,
you
yeah,
say that our saliva is the natural demon regulator in our mouth
yeah,
or
it is.
something.
Yep,
So it's
absolutely.
those salivary proteins that are helping to protect
Exactly.
it.
Yep.
Okay, so at minimum,
Mm.
do not brush your teeth after drinking orange juice or for that matter, anything
Yeah,
acidic.
that's
So
right. Yep.
soda and I don't think many people think this, energy drink.
Yeah, the energy
Not
drinks,
just soda, but
especially. Yep.
energy drinks are really, really acidic. As the toothbrushing action itself, it seems, well, likely you'll brush away some of your teeth. Like it's weird to think about, but it makes sense. It's logical.
Yeah, that's right. So you're wearing away mineral that doesn't necessarily need to be, it wouldn't otherwise be attacked because of,
Right.
of the salivary proteins that would be laid down as protective. I mean, it's trying to protect that,
Hmm.
because there's gonna be somebody out there saying, well, people drink orange juice every day, whatever. They don't have cavities, but they do have thinning of enamel.
Hmm.
And, you can see erosions. Anytime somebody has erosive tooth wear, they always have rounded outside edges of their teeth or
That's interesting.
or their teeth start to get all flat the length of that facial surface of that surface that everybody sees, the
Hmm.
forward facing interior surfaces, right? They all start to have the same general like topology and stuff. They have the same kind of sheen. They start to thin a little bit. Maybe it looks a little bit more yellow, less white. Maybe there's, rounded character. All
And if
that
you're
is
using
part
a
of it.
product that already gets rid of your natural way to protect that,
Yeah, definitely.
then it's going to be
Yeah,
even worse.
yep, you're in trouble there. Yep.
Okay, so we talked about different fluorides previously. Are
Yep.
there some fluorides that are better able to work with these salivary
Oh, most
proteins?
definitely. And you don't necessarily have to have a prescription for this. So there are some already available OTC over
That's
the
great.
counter level that work great and probably the best. Among the over-the-counter level,
Okay.
stannous fluoride, hands down.
And why is that?
Well, we already know that fluoride is readily attracted to the enamel surface, right?
Mhm.
Fluorapatite, calcium fluoride, like reservoirs, all that. Everybody knows that's how fluoride, maybe they don't, but fluoride
If you listen
works.
to us, you
Yeah,
do.
yeah, fluoride works really well and it does so very
Right.
quickly. So fluoride
Hmm.
works on the time scale almost of the salivary proteins, which is really nice. And again, why fluoride is so key.
The immediate
Any other
action.
calcium phosphate phase, especially in abundance, it's not going to have the immediate reaction. So that's why this is a problem. This is why some of the higher loading of calcium phosphates don't work because you have the salivary proteins that are already getting laid down as part of this acquired enamel
It makes
protocol.
sense now.
Pellicle, they're going to start maybe even denaturing depending on the salt-like environment from the calcium phosphate. It may aggregate. You might get clumps of just the calcium. It's going to be a mess, and that's why it is. And so
Right.
somebody says, "Well, hey, I seen pictures and X-rays of the mineral, and it looks like this." No, it's you don't know what the strength of that is. Just because something's there does not mean it's integrated with enamel or
Right.
strong or acid resistant. So all of those go into that. Now that's for a different story. But the whole point is,
Yes.
stannous is way different because among those three types, and there's other fluoride sources, of course, but still, stannous is among the best. Sodium monofluorophosphate, sodium fluoride, they have sodium ions. Well, those sodium ions aren't really doing much except for feeding those microbes and all that kind of action because
Okay.
you're going to use whatever ions that they can for energetic processes.
Okay.
Right? They can't really use stannous very well. And so stannous, which is more complicated, if you will, it's a larger species, it's heavier, more electrons, more reactive, and it can accommodate more neighbors. And so one of the ways that stannous works better is that it already has an affinity to the enamel surface. In fact, it'll actually work similarly to calcium, just like calcium is more complicated, more developed, more agreeable to the tooth than sodium,
Okay.
right? So that's one way. The other way is that stannous can actually act as a cross-linker among multiple proteins because it can have many more neighbors. And the IU School of Dentistry in the 2016 paper that they published that I talked about earlier in PLOS One, where they had 72 proteins
Hmm.
they showed that it's the unique combination of stannous fluoride with these proteins that give a better anti-erosive effect in general relative to, say, if you had all these proteins and added either just fluoride alone or just stannous alone. The
Okay.
stannous fluoride combination, you get the synergy and it gives you way better protection than obviously just, the salivary proteins, but then either fluoride alone or stannous alone.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, stannous fluoride then may
Yes.
be the better source or choice to help someone fight against dental erosion.
Yeah, if it's that bad, or and again, how do you know? Well, you got to talk to your dentist. I
Right.
mean, that's one way. And can you at any time start having that? Of course you can. Anybody who's gone through chemotherapy, right? If you hadn't had chemotherapy and all of a
Right.
sudden now you're going through chemotherapy for whatever reason, you might start having erosive problems. If you've had a dry mouth situation before, or
Hmm.
even if you haven't, but now if you do, you're going to start having reduced availability, not only the ions that'll help strengthen, but also then the salivary proteins that are going to be
Okay.
helping to lay down some of this protective barrier, if you will, this protein like barrier. Now, it's interesting because obviously the FDA moves a bit slower now. It's just the nature of it. The American Dental Association has a seal of approval for dental erosion products. Those are all
Okay.
based on clinical evaluations. The FDA does not have that. Again, because it's not about a disease state. Dental erosion is not a disease. There's no microbes involved. The microbes are dictating whether that's a disease
Okay.
with respect to mineral loss in the teeth. But at least the American Dental Association recognizes it. Not to say that you have to get an ADA seal product, but generally, if you can see, if you know that you're working with a good stannous fluoride toothpaste, meaning is it stable?
Yes.
Is there enough
Yes.
stannous ion in there? Is it having
Absolutely.
great anti-glycolysis benefits? Is it inhibiting plaque? Is it doing what you want it to do?
Hmm.
Then you're going to be doing pretty good. And Procter and Gamble, for instance, they've started to do more and devote more resources to fighting dental erosion. So sometimes their products are marketed
Okay.
in that respect.
That's kind of cool. So,
Yeah,
for me, what I'm getting is the salivary proteins then in enamel are really, really important.
exactly.
And they really need to be taken into account when we're thinking about our oral environment. So, they shouldn't be just an afterthought. People need to be paying attention.
Absolutely right. Chronic use of a fluoride-free, high-cleaning products like Live Fresh or even straight baking soda or enzymatic whitening treatments could lead to clinically detectable issues down the road. Okay, that
Right,
might take the form of like tartar formation, might be dental erosion. You
right.
never know. So you need to be mindful, and the
Hmm.
consumer needs to be mindful. The user, even the dentist, with their with their patients and stuff. What are they using? How often are they using it? We're not saying whitening is bad. We're not saying necessarily fluoride-free products are bad or all this other stuff, but in the pursuit of whiter and cleaner teeth, you could be doing some damage. In the pursuit of
Absolutely.
trying to have a higher buffer capacity to mitigate other issues, you might be compromising your own salivary proteins. You might be diminishing
It
your
makes sense.
the protection. So these are things that are, I believe, are very important. If you listen to our other episodes before, if anybody's ever talked to me, I say switch it up, man. I still say there should be a season of different treatments.
Yes.
I just
Yes.
I just think that change up what you're using, you know?
Okay, so polypeptide based approaches that we're talking about are really for those who already then have
You
damage.
know, yeah, I would say so. And you know, it's like the similarity. For sound enamel, you don't need the fluoride. You don't need the polypeptides. There's some people that have never had caries in their life,
Yeah, I don't like those people.
any kind of decay.
That bothers
Any kind of
me.
decay. If you don't have decay, then don't worry about it. You don't need
Then
the
lucky
fluoride for that
them.
purpose. Now, but they might have other issues. Just because you don't
Right.
have caries, you still might have dental erosion. You still might have
Good point.
gingival, loss,
Yes.
recession of the gums, and now you might start having some sensitivity issues. So
Mm-hmm.
there's other issues than just cavities, than
Mm-hmm.
just that. So, it's kind of hard for me to say stay away from fluoride toothpaste. But I understand that and I can certainly respect that. But for those with dental erosion, the polypeptide approach is especially attractive because again, once your enamel's gone, it's gone. And what we need is polypeptides that are going to be creating
Mm-hmm.
this new mineral. This is why it's a hot topic because we need something. There needs to be something to address the loss of all this mineral.
Okay, so really, you think this research is still really young, right? I know that you've
Oh
even
yeah,
been
yeah.
invited to review a few papers, even way more
Absolutely.
recently. So it's really something that's going to be catching on.
Yeah, I just got invited to review another paper, and what are some of these different polypeptides? Some of these other polypeptides that we haven't mentioned are based on the melanogenin, actually, not
Okay.
the stathin, which I like. But it's still early on. A lot of in
Okay.
vitro stuff, not really a lot of clinical stuff. It has to start in the lab, and I'm totally cool with that. But these are going to be based on a melanogenin analogs. I think some of them are called like, I think there's one like Q95, or there's TARPs and stuff, and TARP. And anyway, somebody can Google that and they can figure it out. But this is relatively new. Do I think it has to be that complicated? Maybe not. I think that
Okay.
there could be other methods. I'm
Okay.
not telling you what those are. If you say, "Hey, what are some of those?"
I
No,
was
I'm
going
not.
to say,
I'm
if you
not.
had to suggest some
No, no, no,
specifically,
no, no. I will say this though, above
okay,
and beyond all the, first of all,
no secrets given
we
away.
need an at-home formulation. So that's the number one. Like the Cure don't.
Okay.
Another reason why I don't like it is not at home. You have to be clinician, and that's it. And the acid you takes away the decay. So what did you just do?
And then you
You
use
didn't
over the
really.
counter fluoride
Yeah,
levels to try
you didn't
to
even stabilize
stabilize
it
it. Yeah,
properly.
no.
Yeah. So I think that that's a waste of money personally. Whenever there's other
And it's
approaches
damaging.
that could be used. Yeah, but has to be at home, has to be water-based, and it has to be compatible with not only fluoride, but other inactive ingredients. I'm not saying it has to come in the form of a toothpaste. I think ideally it should be like in a spray or in a mouthwash.
Okay.
But that is all I'm
That's
going to
just
say
all that
about
you're
that.
going to give. Okay.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, if somebody wants more, they can always reach out and they could talk
There
to
you
us
go.
and maybe
There
we
you
can
go.
talk about it, but,
So,
no more.
okay. So until then, so I really want to stress this. Remember, please, please don't brush your teeth immediately after an acidic drink.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but you could really be saving yourself a lot of wear.
Don't do it at least until there's an effective, clinically proven at home
There you go. Where
enamel
you can
regrowing treatment that could
replenish it.
mitigate all that. Yeah. But until that time, don't do that. That's right. So,
Okay.
okay, everybody. So remember to reach out with comments and questions. We've had a lot of good ones, and this continues to come in. This is one of the reasons why we're doing this study, and we'll address it accordingly. All right. And so for us, that's it. So alongside Tami, I'm Dr. Rob, and we thank you for listening to the Dental Formulators Playbook. Stay curious and keep smiling.